Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I would like to welcome everybody present in the chamber and to those listening online to the business of the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee. I am Councillor Ian Carrington. I'm chairman of the committee. Councillor Martin Griggs, the vice chairman, will hopefully be with us very shortly. I'm also joined by Jess Wassey-Yates, who is our Democratic Services Officer, and Chiara Hadzianu, Scrutiny Officer, is also with us. May I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. A few health and safety notes. We don't have a fire drill planned for this morning, so in the event of the fire alarm sounding, we will need to leave the Council chamber through the rear doors, the ones over there, and leave the building through reception and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. Can I request everybody present to ensure that your mobiles, laptops and iPads or any other device are on silent for the duration of the meeting, and may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated, and if anybody needs that, please make yourself known. Councillor Spratt, good morning.
Yes, sorry, Chairman, I didn't get a chance to talk to you because you was otherwise engaged at me. I'm afraid I have to leave at 11:15 or 11:20.
That's quite understood.
Medical appointment, unfortunately.
Not a problem, Councillor. Thank you for letting us know. In terms of speakers, they will be collated by Jess, I beg your pardon. We will try and ensure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions and make a contribution, and I hope everybody will ask questions and make a contribution. We will try very hard to keep to time. We'll now move, after those introductory comments, onto the formal agenda, starting with item 1, apologies for absence and replacement members. Jess.
Thank you, Chairman. Today we've received apologies from Councillor Bowles.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2, declaration of members' interest. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest? I'm seeing none. If anything occurs to you in the course of the meeting, simply make yourself known and we will take that interest then. Moving on to item 3, which is the minutes for the meeting held on the 12th of September 2023. Is that the correct date? 24th of October. I rather thought the chairman's notes had been mined. The 24th of October, a meeting which we'll come back to because I think we all remember it very well. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of that last meeting as a correct record. You'll find them on pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack. I won't go through them in detail. Does anybody have any comment or problems with those minutes? Seeing none, may I have a proposer that they are a true record? Councillor Higgs, thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor, thank you very much indeed. All those in favour, please show. Those are approved. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to item 4, announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers, starting with chairman's announcements. And I think the first thing that I should comment on is in fact our last meeting. Colleagues will remember that that was held on the Tuesday after the Friday when we were hit by Storm Babette. And as the Environment and Economy Committee, we spent a considerable amount of time considering the very, very serious impacts of Storm Babette on many residents and many businesses throughout the county. There was a good deal of discussion at that meeting, all of which, by the way, has been captured and passed on to the Flood and Water Management Committee. Colleagues will recall that it is not ourselves, but the Flood and Water Management Committee, the statutory committee under the Flood and Water Management Act, which is going to have a very thorough inquiry into that. I was actually a substitute member on that committee, which met in this chamber yesterday. And in fact, I see some faces here who are, I think, at that meeting. And in fact, by coincidence, I was actually elected acting vice chairman, so I was sitting there. The way it was arranged was that members, whether they were on the committee or not, could come along and speak and share their experiences from their particular division. And we spent 3 hours just on that one particular item, and I think given the gravity of the situation which Storm Babette produced, that was absolutely the right thing to do. That meeting formally resolved that it will, as a committee, form itself into a working group to conduct a very thorough inquiry. I have, having taken soundings within this committee and heard your comments at the last meeting, had conversations with the chairman of Flood and Water and with the relevant executive councillor, and I'm confirming in writing with the chairman of Flood and Water a number of things which I hope that committee will find helpful in terms of what should be included in that inquiry. Clearly there are statutory things such as Section 19 investigations which have to go forward. But I think the comment was made by a number of colleagues in this committee when we last met that there is a pattern here, a clear pattern emerging. Whatever your views on climate change are, something is changing. We are now just at the beginning of 2023. We've had a very serious event. We only have to go back to 2019, then to 2013, then to 2007. 4 1-in-100-year events in the space of 2 decades, there and thereabouts. Something is very, very serious. I think that my feeling, and I think the feeling of this committee, and I think members of Flood and Water also have that feeling, is that simply repeating the investigations which were carried out on those previous events is not going to serve us sufficiently in the future. There are statutory things which we must, of course, do, and we must collect all the evidence. But I think the context for this is much wider. We need to look at the broader economic impacts. We need to look at the way in which we do, for example, cost-benefit analyses of how we decide what we fund in terms of, be it flood defences, flood resilience, or any other measures. And we need to look at the way we work as the lead local flood authority, but we also need to look at the way we work with our partners and how our partners work. People like the Environment Agency, the IDBs, who do a stunning job, people like Anglian Water and other actors in that sphere. So I think that the investigation is going to be, as its chairman called it, a very deep dive, but it will also be broad, because we have, and I hope members would agree, to find some innovative ways of breaking out of what is now a pattern, because I think nobody would disagree that as sure as eggs are eggs, we're going to have this again. And Storm Babette was very severe. It was in many ways unusual in weather terms, but that fits in with the projected pattern of more intense situations going forward, and we have to prepare for that. So that investigation will happen. The views of this committee, and I promised that committee that this committee will give any help that it can, the views of this committee will be represented very fully to Flood and Water Management, and I'm sure we will all follow with great interest how that investigation goes forward. I know that many of us in this chamber have had residents who have been very badly affected by the outcomes of Storm Babette, and we are very mindful of the disturbance that they have suffered. Moving on, we've got a busy agenda today with a pre-decision item that is exempt from consideration in the public arena. Therefore, we will take a 10-minute break between items 9 and 10 and resume in a closed session. Once more, I would like to remind officers presenting reports to take these as read by members and only summarise key points and the type of input expected by the committee. And indeed, I would urge all members to play an active part in the meeting, but to do so concisely. Moving on, we have Executive Council announcements. Now, I normally ask, are there any executive announcements by Councillor Colin Davey, the Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning? In this case, I know there is. Councillor Davey cannot be with us today. He has asked me to read out, which I will do if I can get the right glasses on, some comments which he has put. I won't be taking questions on those, but we have senior officers present who will take any questions. And Councillor Davey says, the business team, the Business Lincolnshire team, have had a busy month with business events, and there are a number of key events that have taken place, including the Taming the Dragons investment pitching event. That was held on Wednesday, the 22nd of November. This popular event is now in its 11th year and is a great example of collaborative delivery alongside Greenborough, Streets, University of Lincoln Lincolnshire Business Angels, Wilkin, Chapman and NatWest. There's also been the Greater Lincolnshire Engineering and Manufacturing Network, known as GLEAM. That was held at Manufacturing for Net Zero at the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult Centre in Grimsby on the 22nd of November. And the third one, which Councillor Davies cites, is Business Lincolnshire's Going Global Conference. That was held on Monday the 27th of November at the International Bomber Command Centre. The event attracted over 70 businesses, providing a mix of networking, keynote speakers, including Export Unlocked, PAB Languages, and Shakespeare Martineau, and panel discussions with a focus on using real-life business case studies to promote exporting and share knowledge. Across the county, Councillor Davey continues, we continue to support our small business tenants with a total around 140 now in 5 business centres, innovation centre and industrial and commercial units. Occupancy levels remain buoyant with a healthy mix of lease renewals and new tenants. And work is continuing on the electric vehicle charging pilot, and the tender is currently live. Finally, he writes, we continue to proactively engage with infrastructure providers, recognising the need to balance the different land use priorities. In the new year, we will be pushing a strong case for Lincolnshire in the consultation from National Grid regarding pylons in the county. There needs to be a proper evaluation of such proposals against social, economic and environmental considerations, and I will need to be assured that Treasury Green Book principles have been strictly adhered to, and in that all solutions have been given due consideration and a business case costings have been undertaken. And finally, he writes, as this is the last committee of 2023, may I wish all members a peaceful Christmas and a happy 2024, and I want to thank you all for your careful scrutiny of the areas for which I am responsible. And that is from Councillor Davey, the Executive Member for Economy and Environment. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions for Colin Davey, which this morning will be taken by officers present? Seeing none, I move on. We do not have Support Councillor Dyer with us in the chamber. I beg your pardon, we do have a question. Councillor Mrs. Austin.
Well, no, Chairman. I do not have meeting papers and I can't source them on this iPad. Has someone got something I can source them on, please?
We will make arrangements for you.
Thank you. I shan't need the pink bit because I shall have to have left by then. Thank you.
No worries. So do we have Councillor Dyer online, or we don't? In that case, moving on, are there any announcements by senior officers? I'm seeing a general shaking of heads, so thank you for that. We will move therefore to item 5 on our agenda. This item is the provision of careers advice to all age groups in Lincolnshire. The report can be found on pages 13 to 22 of the agenda pack, and it outlines the provision of careers advice to all age groups in Lincolnshire and summarises some of the work underway to fill identified gaps via the Council's Skills Development Fund and the Careers Hub. And the actions before us this morning, we are asked, 1, to acknowledge the work taking place and deliver careers advice to all age groups across Lincolnshire. 2, discuss the sector approach to developing careers information and identify any contacts that we can approach to give a sector insight. And 3, consider methods we can use to engage the community and showcase the type of jobs Lincolnshire has to offer, including jobs within Lincolnshire County Council. The report will be presented by Thea Croxall, Adult Learning and Skills Manager, and Claire Hughes, Employment and Skills Executive Manager. Amanda Holmes, Senior Project Officer, is also present to answer questions, and we will take questions after the report briefing. So, over to you, Thea.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much for that introduction. Can everybody hear me all right? Yep, lovely, thank you. So, as Councillor Carrington has outlined, the paper in your pack today, and thank you for reading it, outlines the provision of careers advice to all age groups in Lincolnshire, and similarly summarises some of the work that's underway, both in terms of delivering careers advice as well as filling some of the gaps. Now, I'm going to hand over to Claire Hughes, my colleague, who's going to start off the briefing around provision for schools and for our young people. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Thea. Everyone hear me okay? Yeah. You can see from the background section of the report, there's a lot of work going on at national level from lots of different organisations to talk through, ensure that there are good careers education across schools, and also ways to measure this. And I think there are probably 2 points that I would pull out before handing back to Thea. I have a team of 8 people who work on a one-to-one basis with secondary schools across Lincolnshire. This is funded by Lincolnshire County Council. That one-to-one work with schools is around helping them to coordinate, support, and to connect them with businesses and with other organisations who offer career support. So it's a kind of connect and coordinate scheme, if you like. And I think the practical elements that they deliver, they bring schools together in clusters so that they can share best practice. They introduce business leaders to actually get in and work with the senior leadership teams in schools. And importantly, thinking back to that background section, they help schools to benchmark their performance against other schools and against other locations across England to make sure what they are delivering is a good standard of careers education. And whilst there is some way to go, and I think everybody recognises that over the last decade, there have certainly been great improvements within the support that schools are offering to our local children. Practical examples include, you may have heard about Operation Pumpkin, where some of the schools have got together in Boston and Spalding to work around horticulture, right from working with the soil to planting and then growing their pumpkins and seeing how that's translated into food. That's been a fantastic project that our team has been involved in. Right through to business breakfasts, we've got one taking place on Friday in Gainsborough, for example. So some really good practical stuff taking place. And hopefully, if you can find more information out or you want more, you can ask some questions. So I will hand back over to Thea.
Thank you, Claire. So you've heard from Claire about some of the great work taking place to support our young people about future career choices. Similarly, I've provided in the paper on pages 18, 19 and 20 some information about the good work that's taking place for our adults who are enrolled on adult learning programmes. For example, Mr. W, who undertook a Level 2 award in working in schools and colleges and has now gone into employment as a teaching assistant as a result of the careers advice that he received on our programme. However, we know there is still further work to be done to ensure all adults in Lincolnshire who need careers advice, who are interested in changing career, first of all, know where to find that information. And secondly, that the information that we provide to them is provided in a coherent, joined-up way. So as outlined in the report, we've identified 3 work streams in response to gaps in careers advice. So this information is provided on page 21. So these work streams are to develop the career pages on our To Aspire website as a central point for residents to access careers information that's relevant to Lincolnshire industries. Secondly, to map local progression routes to our most important sectors to help our residents with their career planning. This work we've already started, and I know Nicola is going to speak a little bit about it further in the agenda today. And then finally, to design a promotional campaign so that residents in Lincolnshire know about the careers advice available and know where to find it. Your support of this work is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Thea and Claire. So we turn back to the committee. Does any member have any questions which they would like to ask our officers? Councillor Higgs.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 15, the report says that according to research and international reviews, the careers, education and actions are covered by the Gatsby benchmarks. But then it goes on to say that those are not, they're non-statutory. So how does the team then ensure with the schools and colleges that even if that's not followed to the latter, then it's, at least it's along the same lines? Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer that. So absolutely correct. There are some things that are written down as statutory guidance for schools, and they have a duty. They must carry it out. At the moment, the Gatsby benchmarks, as you say, are not. However, each school is being measured. My team actually go in and work with the school to measure performance against each of those 8 Gatsby benchmarks, of which there are about 20 subcategories under each of those 8. So a lot of different questions that the school has to answer. They're being collated, and the Career and Enterprise Company, which is a national organisation for the Department for Education, are compiling those at a national level. And whilst they're not producing a league table as such, they are starting to produce reports annually to show who is performing better than others. So there is a lot of work that's using those, but yes, they're not statutory. They're not in law at this stage. Does that?
I'll add a supplementary about Gatsby, if I may. Your answer raises a couple of questions. The second question, if you will, is that sounds quite a cumbersome process. Are schools which have plenty of admin of their own to deal with content with that? Is the level of complexity something which holds us back? But before that, could you perhaps give us a little bit of background about that? I mean, it's clearly fairly central in the report. The benchmarks evidently require some level of improvement. But could you explain for us a little bit more about what the metrics used actually are? Because I'm not sure that everybody in the room is completely familiar with them, and yet they are very key to the report. So if we could have some understanding of those metrics and what strategies are in place to ensure that all schools and all young people do receive the same level of support.
When I first started at Lincolnshire County Council and looking at careers education, the Gatsby benchmarks didn't exist. They were developed in 2014-15 following a review that looked at systems right across the world. And the Gatsby report actually looks at why they came up with these particular benchmarks. I believe, and if you look at the Select Committee review recently, they are going to look again to see if they are still the right 8 benchmarks. But in terms of answering the question about their complexity, previous to this, schools didn't have a framework. They didn't know necessarily. There was no defined way of saying what a good careers education was. And so what the benchmarks do are provide that framework so they have something to work towards. So yes, there is complexity, but in that complexity, they get to understand exactly what they ought to be delivering to make sure that children get the best education.
Well, I'm grateful for that. I mean, I think as we go forward, it would you're obviously working very closely with schools. and it would be helpful to keep getting feedback and feed it back to this committee about just how easy or difficult the schools find it to do that. I think those of us who are perhaps have been around slightly longer will remember careers advice from many, many years ago, in my case, being a pretty hit and miss affair, with some poor unfortunate member of the school staff, in addition to being history teacher or maths teacher or whatever it was, doing careers advice, and it had to be kind of done. And whether it was really very valuable or not, whenever we hear somebody who's had a great success in life interviewed on radio or TV, they almost always say, well, the careers advisor said I couldn't do anything like this. And of course, they've gone away and done it. So having really good, positive careers advice is immensely important. And it's immensely important not only to the economy of our county, but also to the life chances and quality of life of the individuals concerned. So it is a very, very important area. And we're grateful for your work. Do I have further questions? We do. Councillor Cook, and then we'll come to Councillor Taylor. Councillor Cook first.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think one of the issues we have in Lincolnshire, which we've known for a long time, is trying to keep a lot of the school leavers in the county and not actually looking to disappear as soon as they get to that age of 18 or perhaps after university, where people don't choose to come back because they don't see the career and the opportunities here for them. I mean, in the report I read about, obviously the National Citizen Service. I've met some of those students and individuals that have participated in both Stamford and Grantham, and they are fantastic organisations. And what they do in terms of life skills, but also the networking and the connections, I think absolutely we should do everything we can to support that moving forwards. In terms of schools, though, and I'll start on schools and then move around a few bits, if you don't mind, Chairman. So I presume we work with all schools, whether or not they're state or private, so the county council works with everyone, or is it just more sort of state, sort of academy types of schools? And then in terms of messaging and how we interact with different segments of society, because how let's say a millennial to a Gen Z to anybody else, they use different networking tools and they use different ways of finding out research and stuff. So I suppose it's how do we target for certain markets for certain advice? Because I mean, if I was to be approached for careers advice, you'd normally say you'd probably go to the job centre or something. You wouldn't necessarily look at Instagram or anything else. And then in terms of, I think actually one of the growing sectors, which I suppose we've sort of briefly touched on, is it's all right talking about careers, but actually there was a report only the other day that I think the World Economic Forum stated, which is actually over the next 10 years, 70% of growth in the economy is going to be from digital and tech and, people choosing not to work for established organisations, but actually in terms of setting up their own and becoming founders and, having their own SMEs. So I suppose it's what advice can we support people that want to set up their own businesses, and actually that careers advice around business support more than anything, because that is the growing market. And I think for Lincolnshire, if we want to be a part of that, we need to be looking at our digital skills, but also AI and the growth of technology as a sector, because, we could be a champion of that as a county. And then in terms of local government, which obviously we touched on in the report, it is hugely challenging to get people to consider local government as a career opportunity. Before I became a councillor in 2011, I'd have never considered, I'd have never considered being a councillor, but I'd have never considered a career in local government, actually working in councils or the LGA or other parts of the sector, whereas actually there's a lot of opportunity, and this isn't just for us in Lincolnshire, it's a nationwide issue in the fact that I think the sector itself doesn't sell itself enough to say, actually, if you are interested in a career in your place, and it gives you opportunities to work in different sectors, but different areas of the council, I think there's a huge piece there that we could potentially do in terms of how we partner with our other public sector partners in terms of promoting jobs in that sector. Thank you.
Who'd like to come back on any of those points?
I'll start and then I'll pass over to Thea if that's okay. So we support all publicly funded schools, including alternate provision and schools for children with special and educational needs. We don't support independent, so we don't support private schools, and that's a rule that is given to us through some of the funding that we receive from the national organisation. They are able to take subscribe to newsletters and that kind of thing, but in terms of that one-to-one support, that isn't available. But otherwise, we support everybody. So across Lincolnshire, we're supporting all schools that want this support, and that's all of them. You mentioned about self-employment, and I think that's a really important strand of the careers education. I keep talking about careers education, don't I, and not careers advice. So careers education and the whole 8 Gatsby benchmarks cover a whole plethora of things. So as well as thinking about that sector approach to how, you know, what great sectors have we got in Lincolnshire, we also think about how a young person might manage their career over their lifetime. So it's not always the one-to-one careers advice, that's one bit of the benchmarks. And so I completely agree with you. I think there is a whole host of things we can help educate teachers, educate schools and parents, and so they are giving young people the opportunity to stay and have a career in Lincolnshire. I'll pass over to Thea.
Thank you, Claire. So just to answer the questions raised around self-employment for adults, through the adult education programme, we provide courses to help individuals who are interested in setting up on their own. Similarly, there's a similar programme being delivered via Business Lincolnshire. With regards to your comment about AI and jobs of the future, I think we all recognise that there will be jobs of the future that we don't even know what's going to exist. And so from our perspective, we are supporting residents with training for digital skills, so that they've got those baseline skills, so that they are able to grow and adapt as new opportunities come their way. But recognising that the Adult Education Fund is designed for entry-level provision, so for qualifications up to level 2, and then at that point the National Careers Service will come in and provide advice and guidance on where our residents could move to next for further qualifications, further training, work opportunities with employers if that is of interest to them. But yeah, totally agree that we need to keep our eye on the ball with regards to opportunities for the future and about ensuring that our talented people stay within Lincolnshire and that they are aware of the opportunities available in some of our more diverse careers, diverse sectors. Thank you.
Callum, does that answer your question? Would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. I know I was a bit all over with different points. The only bit I would like to explore is just a bit more is about how we adapt our messaging to the different audiences in terms of different ages and, you know, backgrounds.
I'm actually doing a project at the moment with some students at the University of Lincoln, and the reason it's in my mind is I met them yesterday afternoon, and we had an opportunity as a council to work with some university students as a project, and I've actually asked them, can they think about some of our messaging as young people, and one of them is a postgraduate marketeer. How can we use different ways of targeting young people to think about our sectors and our apprentices and things like that? So we're actually doing some active work on that at the moment. I recognise that I'm not a young person, so we do need some additional expertise in this, so we're doing something.
The official advice of the chairman of this committee is that everybody in this room is a young person, or as young as they wish to be. I think it would be really helpful, actually, if at some point in the future when that project has been developed, when you next give the committee an update, if we could see some of the examples of that. Thea, you wanted to come in.
Sorry, just talking about adults and recognising that not all adults are as clued up with social media. In a project that I delivered with Nicola, Coastal Communities Funded Provision, we found that the best way of getting messages out to residents in coastal areas was by face-to-face talking to them or giving out pieces of paper with the information on it. So you're right in terms of we need to have different menu of ways that we are talking to residents of Lincolnshire and ensuring they hear about what's going on. So we've talked about doing some promotional work to raise awareness of the opportunities through the careers advice that we're putting together. And some of that will need to be on the radio for people who don't necessarily read very well. It's about ensuring the messages goes out in different ways so that people can access it in the ways best available to them. I hope that's all right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for those. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Some of those my questions and comments have been covered. Particular comment there at the end regarding the messaging. I'm pleased to hear that, because I was going to make that comment. We need to adapt the way we communicate the message, including repeat the message. Particularly interested to hear the case studies regarding adult learning, and also the comments regarding the trials regarding agriculture and horticulture. And as you know, we also have the update on the Scrutiny Panel B, agriculture, horticulture, which we spent some time on recently. And we know quite a bit of that work was focused on careers, and also highlighting the rewarding career opportunities and the wide-ranging careers in that sector, which is important to this county. So it'd be interesting if we could have further updates on that. Very pleased with the progress, but it's a journey we need to continue with, rather than full stop, the work's done, to continue in that piece of work, and to also to repeat the message. I think that's my angle here today. Some updates on the case studies would be very worthwhile, and to tweak the message and continue to make it a flexible message. Thank you.
Comments from officers?
We can certainly provide an update on that, and I can find out whether we're looking at repeating the Operation Pumpkin again. It was so successful that I imagine there will be some demand to run it again, so we can report back.
Yeah, I think the general feeling from members is that we absolutely recognise the importance of this area, and I think in future updates it would be helpful to have as wide a range of practical examples as we can, really to increase our understanding and help us to help you in any way that we can. Right, moving now to Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. You're going to have to excuse the sort of preamble to my actual question. First of all, when I do escape from this meeting early, I'm actually going to Boston College, and we've got a chance to look round. Now, what questions should I be asking? What should I be looking at in particular? I mean, AI is something that interests me very much, but my own background is very much on the academic side. I didn't intend to teach, but I ended up teaching. I taught maths, I taught it in grammar school, so I was only teaching the brightest and the best, theoretically. But we've got an excellent university here, so we want to keep our brightest and best, but equally we want to motivate those who haven't got perhaps maybe the push from home that some of us had. And interestingly, a few years ago now, I just had a chance conversation leaning against a wall looking at the river about from a person who I think he said he came from Poland. I forget now, but it was either Poland or Lithuania. And he said, the problem with people around here is they can't be bothered to get the skills. Now, that had been noticed by someone who'd come from elsewhere. So what should I be asking and what should I be looking at when I leave here? Thank you.
What an interesting question. Advice, please.
I would definitely recommend looking at the EMAT Centre, the Engineering, Manufacturing and Agri-Tech Centre, which is a fairly new build and has some fantastic resources. They've also got a logistics sector. So I know this is part of Boston College trying to develop their curriculum in order to meet local employer needs.
Thank you, Claire. And I'd be asking Councillor Austin, I think this is really timely, about their success rate in getting people into employment, and also about which employers do they work locally in order to ensure that achievement is there, and that they have the impact for both for our young people but as well for our adult learners. Because often the adult learners are missed. So it's important that there's a rounded picture. You have good achievement for young people, good achievement for adult learners. And I'm sorry, I'm really passionate about adult learning. Thank you.
May I add one comment, please, Chairman? Interestingly, I did get one very brief chance last year, whilst I was chairman, to visit a group where there was some adult learning going on. I can't think where it was now. It was down at Lock Cottages, but I think it was Taylor ITEX, probably. Yeah. Okay, but, you know, this all ties up, so I'm very, very interested. Thank you.
Just to add to that, as you mentioned, you attended a session. It was a learner focus group at Taylor ITEX, and it's highly important that those individuals being referred for AI courses have the right level of English to be able to, and that's what I'd be asking, you know, at what initial assessments are taking place to ensure that these individuals are going to be successful.
Thank you for that extremely interesting question. By the way, we have had from a colleague remotely a comment just in that in fact Boston College worked very closely with county highways on driver training issues. But I think it'd be really helpful, Councillor Austin, when you've done your visit, if you could give some feedback back directly to our officers. It's good to have that two-way flow and some real experience on the ground. I'm looking around the room. Do we have any further comments? We do. We have the Vice Chairman with us. Good morning, Councillor.
Morning. Sorry for my tardiness, everyone. Just to come back on what Councillor Austin said, I must declare an interest. Obviously, I teach at Boston College, so I can answer some of those questions for you already. Every learner, regardless of whether they're adult or young person, takes an initial assessment in maths and English so we can gauge their level. That way we can scaffold the learning to best meet their needs. There's also lots of advice and support help around to get people's language abilities up to the level they need to achieve. Obviously, any specific questions, I'm more than happy to talk to you outside of the meeting.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any other members who wish to make a contribution? I'm seeing none, in which case I can just say thank you very much indeed for that. It is such an important area. It's important for our economy, it's important for retaining talent in our great county, and it's hugely important for the individual life chances of the young people and the adults of whatever age concerned. So we have a suggested proposal, which is to record the various key points and comments which have been raised by the committee. I move that the committee notes the contents of this report and supports the work that is underway by the Council's Skills Development Fund and the Careers Hub, aiming to help fill gaps identified in the report as discussed. And I also ask that our comments in relation to the sector approach to developing careers information and on the methods which can be used to engage the community and showcase the types of jobs Lincolnshire has to offer, as captured by our officers, are shared with relevant officers and portfolio holders in support of their efforts. Does anyone dissent from that? I'm seeing no dissent. Thank you very much indeed. That is agreed, and thank you again for a very interesting report. Moving on now to item 6 on the agenda. This is Service Level Performance Against Corporate Performance Framework 2023-24, Quarter 2. This report summarises the service level performance against the Success Framework 2023-24 for Quarter 2 on the 3 areas that fall within the remit of this scrutiny committee, economy, environment and waste. And you will find the report on pages 23 to 36 of the agenda pack. The actions before us this morning are that we consider and comment on the environment and economy service level performance for Quarter 2. The report will be presented by Samantha Harrison, Head of Economic Development, Chris Miller, Head of Environment, and Mike Reid, Head of Waste. We will take questions after each section of the report presentation, which I think is just a clearer way of doing things. So, who's going to start? Samantha, are you going to be starting with us? Excellent
yes,
stuff. Over to you.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm delighted to update you on the progress of the 3 performance indicators under the economy agenda. The first one is the number of qualifications achieved by adults, and you'll see that we have an actual figure of 1,036 adults that have progressed through qualifications. Now, to kind of put this into context, we didn't report the figures in Q1 because we were finishing the academic year, and it's all about the last tranche of the previous academic year that we're now reporting on, and then as of September we've started the new academic year. So we've had a real increase in the number of learners, and also, as I've previously mentioned at the council meeting, we've had a number of courses that contain a multitude of qualifications. So, for example, if you want to take a construction course, you could have introduction to plumbing, plastering, get your green CSCS card, carpentry, etc. So what we are trying to do is ensure that there's more vocational qualifications that people are coming out with. However, moving forward, we do want to drive the focus in terms of the functional qualifications like maths and English moving forward. So we've had a really good high start to the year, but we will see that kind of tailor off as we're trying to push people more to the kind of longer, more higher level qualification courses moving forward. The next one that I'd like to talk to you about is the level of external funding attracted by the County Council to support the economy. So we've received a substantial amount of money from the Department for Business and Trade, and that is for our Business Support Growth Hub. It's also for our Inward Investment Service. So how can we help land the foreign-owned businesses to come and reside within Lincolnshire and bring their supply chains? We've had funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and thank you to the local authorities that have bought into the shared service of the Growth Hub. I'm pleased to say that we are providing a comprehensive service, and I'll come on to that latterly. And overall, we are on track for the funding target currently. The final target that we've got are the number of businesses supported in Lincolnshire by the council, and the Growth Hub has had a busy time in providing a robust programme of offers. So we've now got a clear programme of support for the low carbon sector, for manufacturing, for investment readiness, scale up and starting your business. One of the things that I did want to point out, and it was mentioned earlier, we had the Going Global conference yesterday. We had fantastic numbers there. A lot of businesses said they had paused their innovation journey because of innovation and international trade journey because of COVID. Now they are looking to reignite it, looking to start trying to grow their business and trade directly further afield, which is great for us, and it puts our strategy back into play. The other thing I'd like to mention is we have a working programme with the Mosaic Digital Hub. That Mosaic Hub is in Lincoln, but it has outreach support across Lincolnshire, and we have a digital advisor. So we are supporting businesses to look at various opportunities, be it artificial intelligence, be it sensor management, online booking, social media, how they can do podcasts to promote some of their services and products. So we're really trying to support our traditional sectors to move forward, and we've seen a real uptake in those services. Finally, in terms of our Inward Investment Service, we've seen an increase in inquiries coming forward, and we've serviced 70 businesses within the last quarter. These have predominantly been through our tailored propositions, so particularly for the agri-tech sector that we've received a great number. So we're all on track, very pleased with the direction of travel and continuing the hard work for the next quarter. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm looking to members for questions or comments. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chairman, and I apologise for being late to this meeting. One comment and two questions. The graph, the pie chart, which is at the top of page 25, the comment is, I know these things are really fiddly sometimes on Excel, but could we have consistent colours? The colour of East Lindsey has changed from yellow to grey as it goes from graph to graph, and I think Boston has gone from grey to black. The question is about that graph. What exactly is it showing me? Is it... Oh, sorry, you've got your microphone on. Thank you. Is it is it showing that there isn't much provision in South Kesteven, West Lindsey and South Holland for college training? Is it showing people who are on full-time courses, or does it include vocational courses, or I guess day release, or learning on the job? I understand from the text above that it looks like adult learning. And also, do we know, are we aspiring as a county or as districts to get people onto these courses? The reason I ask is that at South Kesteven we're crying out for electricians and chippies and plumbers and so on, and because there is an undersupply, and we're just toying with the idea of getting work-based apprenticeships for those kinds of things. We've got some apprentices, but not nearly enough to meet the demand. What can we do as a county to encourage people to take up those places, and what can we do to increase the provision at West Lindsey, South Kesteven and South Holland generally? And why are East Lindsey, looking at the top graph, why are East Lindsey so enthusiastic about learning compared to, say, South Holland, 2.3%? Is that a cultural thing or a provision thing?
Happy to answer the question. So in terms of the graphs on page 25, it's the number of adult learners that are on our programme. So we do not, we have contracts with various training providers and with colleges, but we do not seek to overlap. So we operate in areas where there is a need or there isn't current provision. So in terms of these pie charts, they are purely our adult qualification programme. So it'll include the functional skills and also the vocational qualifications. Now, in terms of the share across the districts, we operate in areas of need. So where there isn't a provision, or where there's the greatest level of deprivation or level of low academic qualifications, we will drive our services to support that area. We do align and work closely with our college partners and universities. So if we can, we want to align provision, but also promote sectors and provision across the board. So we're happy to have those further conversations, because if we can tailor our introduction courses to being an electrician or a plumber or a welder or a builder, anything that we can do to help a district, we will tailor that service. We are actually extending our promotional campaigns as well to try and get more people aligned to this, because we realise that there are certain gaps in sectors across the board.
If I've got that right, what we are trying to do, I think, if I can summarise the first part of your reply to Councillor Baxter, is that our efforts complement other providers. Now, clearly, there's going to be a wealth of other providers out there, and I've no idea how data on them, if any, is collated. I just wonder, is there any way of providing context to these figures, in the sense that when you look at them, I did appreciate that basically, 23% of what we do is in East Lindsey. It's not a geographically balanced graph in that sense. But is there any way of providing, does the data exist to allow a context to be provided of what those other providers are doing, which would give some impression of the overall level of provision within the various districts, borough and the city which make up our county?
What we can do is, we have got some research that we've undertaken to understand what the provision is, to ensure that we are meeting the gaps. So we can put that into the next report and give you a little bit more information to show what is currently being provided and how we link through to it. Very happy to do that.
I think that would be very helpful. Hopefully, Councillor Baxter, that would help at least part of your concern. Did you want to come back?
Yeah, at risk of exposing my ignorance as usual, who are these other providers? Are we talking about FE colleges, schools? And if FE colleges and schools are not in the graph, then what exactly is in the graph?
So in terms of our graph, it's where we've provided either contracts to deliver adult education programmes to colleges. So it could be Grantham College or Boston College or Stamford College, etc. We also have 29 small training providers that we have contracts to deliver services at. And we are really proud of working with those smaller training providers because they're the ones with local outreach. They know the individuals, they're invested in Lincolnshire, and they really deliver that tailored learning support. And what we've seen is once somebody goes on a training course, they then get the confidence to progress through and extend their learning, which is just what we need. So we offer that course. In terms of the provision, so they might have an introduction to the care sector, then they might want to then say, I want to specialise in understanding autism, or I then want to get a nursing qualification. So we will then put them through a ladder of progression of support, an onward journey. The same with, we have an introduction to hospitality. We then look to say, what about understanding retail operations? How do you understand, would you like to go into catering and understand how to be a chef? So it's all about giving them the initial confidence to then kind of help shape their growth journey, and it does work very well. We have got quite an extensive ladder of progression.
Thank you for that. Justin, I think you wanted to, Justin Brown at the back, wanted to add something. Justin, over to you.
Yeah, just as a very crude measure, there is about £18.5 million a year of adult ed budget coming into Lincolnshire, and we receive around 2 million of it. So there's about 16.5 million which goes primarily to further education colleges, and what we do through Samantha's team, Thea's team, etc., is work with the colleges to say, what are the parts you can't reach? And then we programme our money into those parts. So what we'll do for the next report is create a bit of background around what that other 16.5 million is spent on, and then we'll be able to show our progression.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Good question and some good responses. We look forward to seeing that the next time round. Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. Samantha, how does the current system decide what new courses to start with? Is there a conversation between further education centres and the council? And do either of those establishments make inquiries to the general public to find out if there's courses that could be brought in for the future? Thank you.
Thank you. So what we have an annual commissioning cycle that we look at to understand where our growth sectors are, what the gaps in terms, what we're finding in terms of, say, for example, if there's an issue in terms of the number of adult care workers, or if we've got hospitality dearth of people coming through. So we put out a very clear perspective saying these are the kind of sectors that we're looking to grow within Lincolnshire. This is the opportunity, and we invite training providers to bid into us with the kind of provision that they would be able to deliver across the patch. So we look at areas where, for example, we know there's a gap in training in terms of East Lindsey, so we want to make sure that we have got a robust provision covering that area because of there is a lack of college provision currently. So for us, it's about then working with the people that apply, so the training providers that are on our list that apply, and then negotiating to understand what courses that they will deliver. They come back to us and we score them with a number of measures, but some of them are about that innovative new courses that they're bringing forward and the evidence base behind it. How are they meeting local needs?
Thank you very much for that. I'll put a question in myself, and that relates to the very good news. P1, bottom of page 25, P171, amount of external funding attracted to Lincolnshire, the actual 8,360,000, target 4,283,000. So very good news in that quarter, and congratulations to all concerned. My question is really one of background, which I've raised before and I'm not shy about raising again. Time was, a few years ago, when an awful lot of the funding that came into the county came from a particular single source, in other words, European Union funding of one kind or another. And I remember when I first joined this council and joined this committee, a live discussion was going on. We're now several years in to the new regime. Is it correct to say that you are now having to spend much more time and effort for every pound that you win because they are coming from much more diverse potential sources? How is that impacting on the balance between money gained and the resources we have to deploy? And going forward, in simple terms, is it working?
Thank you. Yes, you very correctly summarised the situation that we're in. We're spending a lot of officer time trying to find funding to actually enhance our service. So some of our services have been pared down because of the lack of European funding, and because of the requirements of UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because it's a lower amount of money for the local authorities, but also it has a number of requests in terms of supporting the community, supporting skills and supporting businesses. The level of funding that we've been able to apply for to deliver our services has been greatly reduced. So whilst we have been successful in some areas, we've really pared down our delivery programmes. So it's affecting the business community in terms of their provision, it's affecting some of our sectoral provision in terms of business support, and we're looking, as always, to spend officer time to see how we can make the programme more robust. So is there an opportunity to bid for money from other pots that we're able to come across, anything that Department for Business and Trade are offering. So it's a much reduced landscape, and I think the challenge that we've got is a lot of the business community have been used to this hand-holding support, the guidance, the scale-up support, and we've actually said, oh, no, we've only got so many places on the programme, we're now full, you can't attend. Whereas we've never had that in the past. We've been able to grow the programme with the client need. So for us, we're hopeful with the devolution outcome that we would be able to see whether there's an opportunity to expand business support moving forward. But we've definitely got an increase. Demand is outweighing supply currently. We are challenged. So we are having to put quite a high entry criteria on some of our programmes to make sure that we've got really the right businesses on it that are going to make a difference, going to employ people, going to increase their productivity, which before we've really helped the fledgling businesses to start that growth journey. So yes, it is a challenge.
Yeah, just underlines, I think, the importance, and it's a separate issue, and it's one that we might discuss in another meeting, of the cooperation in different levels of local government in terms of the ED, economic development work that we do at the County Council, and making sure that we work with other providers, district, city and borough, because it is important that we maximise the output from a now more limited amount of input. But thank you very much indeed for that answer. Are there any more questions in the chamber for Samantha? In that case, we will move on. Next is Chris Miller. Chris, it's been a quiet month in the environment. Have you got much to report?
Very little, Chairman, thank you. No, in all seriousness, I think what I can say is that it has been extremely busy. You will have observed, obviously, in the report that the reporting period we look at in Q2 excludes the Storm Babette event. So in terms of our official reporting for the corporate performance in Q2, we were looking at a number of 53 Section 19 reports dating back to 2019. And obviously, our normal wording is that we say these are exceptional numbers generated during a series of flooding events during 2019 and 2020. Obviously, since the Q2 period, we have had Storm Babette, and it would be remiss of us not to reflect upon that and the alterations that would make to the figures going forward into Q3, which we'll report at the appropriate time. But just for information here and now, Councillor Carrington has already highlighted
in his chairman's address at the start, the discussion that took place at Flood and Water Management Scrutiny yesterday, which is extensive and very useful, looking at the totality of the event and looking at our next steps, as well as a review of what's happened during the event. And in Councillor Davies' address to that committee, which will be circulated to all members at a later date, but just picking up on one of the elements of this, just to give you some context. Some catchment experienced 3 times the normal monthly rainfall during that event. And at its peak, there were 29 flood warnings and 32 flood alerts across Lincolnshire. We saw at least a month's rain in 24 hours over the overnight period of the 19th and 20th of October, and up to 90 millimetres fell in some areas, with multiple rainfall gauging stations recording record levels. For example, at Waddington, the recording was 46.8 millimetres, which was the highest recording in 76 years. So it just gives you some context of just how large an event this was by comparison to what we've experienced previously. In terms of what that does to our figures, for just that event alone, and you'll have seen in the report on page 29, there are some figures in there. Well, I can update those today on the most up-to-date figures from last night. We're now at 684 properties reported as being affected by internal flooding, with a further 491 properties suffering from external flooding of gardens or outbuildings. There was 48 instances of roads needing to be closed alongside 98 others of just highway flooding causing disruption. And we now are down to 129 reports requiring further investigation by the team to establish if they were internal or external flooding events. In total, that brings us to 173 new Section 19 reports that will require undertaking based on those figures, so quite a significant leap from the 53 that we had outstanding at the end of Q2. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. Chris, have you got any idea how long these reports are going to take? Because the workload that must have been put onto your department must be phenomenal. So I'd like to know that. The second question is yesterday at the Flood and Drainage Committee, where we were both present, I mentioned North Beck to the EA, where there were no properties actually flooded, but flooding did go right up, went into the gardens. And I had a look last night on the Section 19 notice, and I couldn't see North Beck down there. So I guess the question is, are you expecting even more properties and more areas to be added to your list? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgs. Yeah, just taking that first question, yes, obviously it's a significant uplift in the number of Section 19 reports we'll have to investigate, and we're looking at the various opportunities for undertaking that. It won't just be the team, the Floods and Water Resource Management team that I manage through Matt Harrison, that will be undertaking that. We'll look at external agencies to assist in that, as we have done previously, so it's not like this is without precedent, but it's just the scale of it. So we'll probably look at a multiple number of agencies to help us with those investigations. In terms of time frame, it will really depend on the complexity. Some of it might be quite simple in terms of the causality of a Section 19 flooding event in a certain location. It might be quite clear and obvious, but in some cases, for example, Horncastle, where there might be multiple factors, they will take longer just by the scale of them. So we can't put an exact figure on it, but we will be working to clear them just as quickly as we possibly can, and without any further delay. Obviously, that's caveated by we're at the start of the storm season, and there is no guarantee we won't see future storms affecting this even more at this current time. So it's with that watching brief that we continue forward. In terms of the number of Section 19s just after Storm Babette, yes, it may go up still. Our investigations take place where there is evidence of water ingress to a property. So North Beck, as you mentioned, didn't actually ingress property, so they won't have triggered a Section 19 by right. That's not to say that we won't investigate. We do have that an opportunity to undertake investigations regardless of that ingress, but our focus is on those areas where properties have already seen a flooding event within a property. So yes, hopefully that answers your question.
Other members have any questions for Chris? Councillor Fleet.
Yes, it's just picking up on the section 19, and if this was a game, I'd be accused of repetition, I think, because I think so many meetings I've been to, and I've talked in terms of section 19. These are both Drainage Board, Environment Agency and Council meetings. Section 19 reporting is all well and good, and I do have a little sympathy for you, Chris, with regard to your workload from last month. But the issue with Section 19 reporting, of course, is that if water goes inside the property, it becomes a Section 19 report. But if it goes in the garage or an outbuilding, it is not a Section 19 report. And I've been pressuring, asking for a long, long period that we do need to basically move those guidelines so that if people get ingress of damp, whatever sort of moisture, water, sewage into outbuildings as well, that also needs to be included within Section 19 reporting. A little bit into the garden, it's not acceptable, but it happens. But once it starts going into your garage, and if you've got all your valuables in the garage, as I've seen for many people, all the domestic tools, the electric drills, etc., they soon get waterlogged, and they really do become a very expensive issue for a lot of householders. So Section 19 needs to include outbuildings and garages.
Fully understood, and I'm equally aware that we've responded on this in the past. Just quick tot up of what that would have mean after Storm Babette. That would have put us at over 1,300 Section 19s to undertake, and the attendant cost of that is way beyond our current resourcing levels. So, our previous responses would probably, still hold true now, that it's a question of prioritisation, and we've prioritised those as a council. This isn't officers. This is the way that we've formally adopted a policy through the council that we will only look at those initially, at those where property has been ingressed, and regrettably those that are what we term as the near misses don't automatically have a Section 19, but there may be other reasons why Section 19 may be taken out for such instances, depending on the circumstances.
Yes, thank you for that. And if I could, excuse me, if I could just add to that, I think, as I understand it, we are capturing for the Storm Babette incident, we are capturing near misses and plotting those from the reports that have come in by telephone through Fix My Street and various other sources. And I do think that's immensely important. I think many members who've had flooding in their divisions will be able to cite instances. I can think of 3 or 4 dwellings which I visited where the flooding did not go into the house. It did cover their gardens, it went into outbuildings, garages and what have you, and it missed the dwelling by millimetres. And I think for future security and resilience measures, being able to map and plot those near misses and the ones where sadly it was not a near miss is enormously important. So I'm glad that data is being captured. Councillor Fleetwood, though, you wanted to come back.
Yes, and obviously I'm talking in terms of Section 19 for domestic properties, but as an example, I have a village hall that's been flooded, and I don't know where that would fit within the regime, because normally Section 19 reporting would deal, I think, with domestic properties. I don't know if it deals with commercial properties or village halls or community buildings.
It would. So, for example, we also have a number of schools that were affected in the local area, so they would also be subject to a Section 19 investigation as well.
Any further questions for Chris? Chris, I think one thing that I should say on behalf of the entire committee is that we all know the enormous amount of work which your team are now doing, and they have our support as they have flood and water management support. And I think we should all remember that there is a huge range of different impacts, economic, social, but above all personal, caused by this. Any of us in this room, officers or members, who have been and visited people who have been flooded, we know the enormous emotional impact and strain that places on our residents, and indeed the risk of it. I remember on the Friday evening it had got dark. I was in the village of Hayington, watching the beck in the heart of the village overtop. it had never done that in living memory. Haington was suffering already from massive groundwater flooding, which got worse over the weekend. The stress of the householder that I was standing next to was etched on their faces. And I remember, I think it was on the Wednesday, the day after this committee last met, that Councillor Corey and I went round both our divisions with our MP, Dr. Caroline Johnson, and we went to one house where I'd been for 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And the lady just burst into tears, not, I think, just because she saw me, but it was just an illustration of the enormous stress that these events, and that was a dwelling which had been repeatedly flooded through groundwater, and this time had suffered from groundwater and the beck. The strain it puts on individuals and the feeling at the back of their minds, oh Lord, this is going to happen again. It is something that we should all be very, very mindful of, and I'm sure that Chris and his team will do everything as the inquiry by Flood and Water Management goes forward to try and do our best to increase resilience to this problem. Thank you, Chris, very much for that. We move on now to our third speaker, Mike. Over to you, Mike Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, everyone. Just looking at the 4 KPIs which are on page 32, the bar charts for members to reference. The first one is the household waste collected across all waste streams, and that continues to paint a good news picture for us in the county because it's below the target of 560 kilograms. At the moment it's 527 kilograms, which is always the highest priority on the waste hierarchy. And just for members' reference, the waste hierarchy is further up in the document. It's a couple of pages below this with the explanation, which continues to stay in the report just to help with the context of what we're looking at. So less material being presented is really good news. However, looking at the second KPI, 160, the recycling rate across all waste streams, it's fluctuated. It's plateauing around about 42-43% for some time now. It's below the target of 50%, and this is across all waste streams, which includes household waste recycling centres and curbside and other avenues where the district councils collect material. So it's impossible to understand why this is struggling so far below 50%. I think there's a national kind of trend here, which I'll go into in a bit more detail latterly. But we think, and the government have provided this new policy on simpler recycling, which should try and redress some of this shortfall. And I'll go onto this in a few minutes' time. So I'll briefly just touch on the 2 remaining KPIs. The third one is the recycling rate at household waste recycling centres, which has shown a quite significant increase on the last quarter. It's gone up to 74.9%, which is just slightly below the target at 75%, but it's going in the right direction. Some of this, we believe, is down to an increased production or presentation of garden waste at the recycling centres, and also some of it may be down to the improved engagement we have on our sites, and we have a better working relationship with our site contractors who have been operating these sites since April of this last year. So these new contractors are very much quite different to some of the old contractors that we had, and more than happy to engage with the public and just try and talk to people about what they're actually disposing of and what materials go in which containers, and separating and segregating material. So we think that these 2 factors of engagement and garden waste is helping to contribute to this improvement, but it will be a bit of a watching brief. And lastly, the 4th KPI is the landfill waste, which is excellent news. At the moment, we're projecting 0.71% for the whole year, and that's well below the target of 5%. Landfill is if just referring to the waste hierarchy again, landfill is the worst eventuality for dealing with waste. It's something that we've been striving for many years now to get that as close to zero as possible. Zero might not be realistic in the complete long run, but it's something that we will continue to aspire to. basically what happens is when material goes to the energy from waste plants, it doesn't count as landfill. However, we do sometimes have issues, emergency shutdowns and planned maintenance shutdowns, where we have to divert away from the energy from waste facility. In the past, that has resulted in more material going into landfill as an emergency measure. However, we've kind of helped to redress this recently by looking at other avenues as a plan B to prevent material going to landfill at Leadenham. And we are hauling it slightly further afield, but ultimately I think we can be very kind of confident that this is doing better for the environment and it's better for the county purse if we don't face the same kind of landfill tax that would apply. So we've got some good measures, but the one measure of overall recycling rate is something that continues to kind of baffle lots of waste managers, not just locally but across the country, and hence I put in a couple of sentences about the national context, which hopefully I think we should try and redress some of this issue with recycling rates. And I think one thing that has been clear recently is that the Environment Act has been delayed, and there are issues at national level about and certain nervousness about what the Environment Act could mean for residents, because originally it was envisaged that this could potentially lead to 7 bins at each property. That was clarified in the Prime Minister's briefing just over a month ago, where he came up with a different initiative which is providing local authorities more flexibility and not be as prescriptive as having a material in a separate bin. So essentially what this means is that we can commingle materials if they are going to get recycled and sorted and processed. So this is a kind of an acceptance that we need to be mindful of what residents have and the space and the limited space that they have, even though they might want to recycle. So fortunately, in the county, for many years now, we've met this principle of mixed dry recycled material. So we have blue bins where different materials are deposited by the residents, and then they get hauled away and processed and sorted into different constituent parts. So we're already meeting a lot of this simpler recycling ideology, which the Prime Minister is rolling out. The one area where we are having to consider and having to improve is going to be the collection of food waste. That is going to be a national requirement, so that is clear. There's no flexibility around the food waste collection and disposal. It's clear for all authorities in the country that we will have to have a weekly separate collection and disposal of food waste, which at the moment the food waste goes into the black bin and goes for incineration at the energy from waste facility. So this represents an opportunity for us, because incinerating food waste is not the best way of disposing of that type of material. So at the moment we've been going through a market engagement process with different processors to look at different types of disposal outlets, and it's clear that anaerobic digestion should provide a better means of disposal. And that provides 2 benefits. The first one is a financial benefit, because anaerobic digestion is a lot cheaper process, and rather than paying around 65 or 99 pounds per tonne of material to be incinerated at the FW, we could potentially be a lot lower than that, which could provide a financial income once we've put the infrastructure in place. So that's the financial gain from this. Then there's the environmental gain of treating the food waste very separately and very differently, with a smaller carbon footprint compared to incineration. Anaerobic digestion is a lot better for the environment than incineration. And ultimately, doing this kind of process will shift the food waste from where it is on the waste hierarchy. At the moment, it's classed as recovery, as it's going through the energy from waste facility. If we start treating it as anaerobic digestion, that moves it into a recycling phase. And ultimately, that will give we think, a projection of 7% improvement in the overall recycling rate. So the target is 2026 to have this system of separate food waste collection and disposal, have that in place for 2026. And we will be working, we have started already working very closely with all district council partners to kind of bring this programme forward. And hopefully we will see the improvements, not just the environment and the performance, but a kind of financial gain from this. But we are very conscious that we need to work very closely with the district council partners as part of the Waste Partnership. So there is cause for optimism, and yes, I'll finish there, but open up for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Fascinating report. Questions from members, starting with Councillor Baxter, then we'll come to Councillor Cook.
Thank you. I've got a few. Firstly, the timescale for the Environment Act. You've said that the food waste comes in 2026. Are there other aspects of the Environment Act which are coming in sooner? On recycling, we're not doing very well. We're still not doing very well. We're doing very well in getting waste away from landfill, but we don't seem to have had any shift change in recycling, the 43% recycling rate. That's been similar for years and has actually come down. 10 years ago, we were more like 50%. So that's despite the rollout of the purple lidded bins. And I thought that the purple lidded bins would be a kind of a game changer. Is the effect of the purple lidded bins for paper and card just that the quality of material is much better, or why hasn't it changed the overall rate of recycling as you might have hoped it would? You said, and I don't mean to be mean to you, but you said it is impossible to understand why recycling isn't going up. I don't think it's completely impossible to understand any of it, and I would say that education, finance, initiative, processes, there are all kinds of reasons why the recycling rate is staying low. And I think a lot of that is about the people understanding what's supposed to go in the bin and what's not. You've said that there is quite an improvement in the household waste recycling centre total, which I think has gone up from something above 70 to something below 75. So it's not a massive improvement, and I've just looked back at the figures for some time. We used to beat the 75% figure on a regular basis. It's going back to kind of 2015, 16, 17. I don't understand. So we've had a change of supplier. I don't understand why the change in materials is not quicker, because I think people go to the household waste recycling centre with good intent, a lot of them expecting that everything will be magically recycled. I understand that the magic doesn't always work the way you want it to. But anecdotally, I've been to the household waste recycling centre twice in 1 week. The first time they said plastics, put them in the general waste because the plastics bin is full, and a few days later they said exactly the same thing. I don't know if that's a common occurrence, and I know that I'm not a representative sample of Lincolnshire. And finally, on food waste, who will pay for the collection? You talked about a financial gain, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant if we're going to make money out of food waste. But the cost of the new collection vehicles and the cost of the weekly collection, I assume it will be district councils that pick up that cost. And if so, do you know if there are going to be new burdens funding from the government to help us afford that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just start with the last point first, because I think that is, to me, that's the most interesting. I think you're right to pick up on the fact that the finance of this is going to be significant. I think government have stated that new burdens funding will be available to waste collection authorities alone and not waste disposal authorities. So at the moment, they've said that it's 295 million across the whole country. We don't think that will meet everybody's requirements at district level. But districts are talking to the government about what the proportion of each authority of that finance they will receive. So that's ongoing. As a county, we won't get any central government funding. We are seeing, or the projection is that we will have to pay for our increase in services and disposal costs and infrastructure by the improvements in the financial saving at the disposal end. So we will have to change our haulage contracts. We will have to have extra infrastructure in place to receive food waste. We will have to self-fund that, and that's through an invest to save principle. So if we can see these long-term savings from diverting food from incineration to AD disposal, that will hopefully fund the required capital that we have to invest. And at the moment, it could be up to £10 million that we have to invest in our waste transfer stations to help deliver this initiative. So it's not small figures, but the long-term saving of diverting food waste could be anywhere between £2 and £3 million a year. So any investment could pay for itself within a handful of years. So that's regarding the kind of new burdens funding. Just going back to the first point about the Environment Act, there is something coming forward which is an extended producer responsibility, which is starting later next year, which requires all producers of materials, packaging materials, anyone who's supplying goods to the market, to actually start funding local authorities for disposal and collection costs. There is still a lot of detail to be provided by DEFRA on how this will work, but ultimately, if we start receiving funding from a pot of money which is generated from the private sector packaging companies, then that will help to finance some of the services that us as a disposal authority and the waste collection authorities have to deliver, and that's coming in next year. Some of the other things which were initially discussed around deposit return schemes for bottles and drinks containers, they haven't been brought forward in the same way, because I think that the financial viability of that measure, initially touted as part of the Environment Act, government have looked at it again and thought that there isn't possibly the business case that they originally envisaged. Just coming back to the second point about recycling rates, I say it's difficult or impossible to understand why recycling rates are as they are, because we all have personal choices. What we do, what we present, what we throw in a bin in our property, if you choose to throw something in one bin as opposed to another, there is absolutely no way that we can stop someone making that choice. It's not realistic. We are at the behest of what the public will do. So you're right, there is a lot to do in terms of engagement and education, which why we have a programme whereby we have a team going around visiting schools, and we are really well subscribed with this. We have officers in my team who regularly go out one or two schools every week to talk about the issues that we have facing us. So it's really difficult at the reception end to understand why someone presents a certain type of material at a recycling centre, because we are presented with this. And similarly, at the curbside element, there's a responsibility on district councils as well, because we are disposing of material which district councils present to us. So if the district councils start to change the approach and want to be a bit more kind of on board with engagement, that might be something which creates a bit of a step change. So there is lots of different issues that we don't want to point a finger of blame, because we all have a part to play in this. I think it's really difficult to understand why recycling rates are as they are. And as I've said, it is a national context, it's a national picture. In terms of the purple bins, you're right to pick up on the fact that they haven't changed the recycling rate, because the recycling rate is reliant on what the the material is collected and dropped at our facilities. So it's not actually changed the recycling rates, because previously that paper and card would be in the mixed dry recyclate bin, and that would count as recycling. When we've switched it to purple lidded bins, it's still counting as recycling, because that's how we receive it. And it's co-mingled at the transfer stations, and then it's sent for processing. So it's not changed the recycling rate. However, it has changed the quality of material, and the financial impact is far better, and the environmental impact, because that material has got a higher value, it's not contaminated, and it's been processed into a higher value product. If we didn't do that, more raw materials, trees would have to be cut down to provide that same product. If we have a lower value product, then that low value product is not replacing anything similar. So because we have such good quality paper and card, we are essentially preventing trees from being cut down. And it's something which there is a financial gain, but that money that income that we generate is ploughed back into the services, and it helps to support the other pressures that we've got within the waste service budget. Just on I've gone through the recycling centre issue, but regarding the HWRC figures, again, it's difficult. It is. I don't want to labour the point about what we're presented with, but on each site we receive over 25 different types of material. So we're giving lots of different avenues to the public to dispose of their material. I think there is more to be done on engagement and education on sites about saying how people can separate things. But I think it's within all of us that we can be lazy and just think, oh, well, just put it in that bag and just put it in one. Because it's convenient, it goes into one residual compactor. And I think there's a lot of work still to be done, not just locally but nationally, about what we can do in separating and segregating different materials. And regarding the issue of materials, plastics, for example, 1 week being separated into a plastic disposal container, and the week after going into a different container, where we have any kind of disruption in the supply chain, in the contractor or disposal element, we sometimes make the decision, and it is a tough choice, but it's a conscious choice, that we will allow materials to go to other avenues, because there's a balance to be struck. If someone's taken the time to load their vehicle, go to a site, and we have an issue whereby we're having to potentially turn away certain types of material, sometimes we do take a judgment call and tell residents that they can put other materials, if it's a small amount, in a different type of container. So it may not be recycled, it could go for incineration, but that's a judgment call of managers, because we are conscious that residents have taken the time and effort to come to site, and to turn them away could be quite a negative kind of thing to do. So there's a balance to be struck. But hopefully I've answered all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm very conscious that I don't want to curtail the debate, but we are running more than 20 minutes behind time. So I would like to move us on a little bit. Thank you for those figures. I would just say briefly, on behalf of all members, that the business of the plateauing recycling, I am aware that this is a national issue. And at the time of the Prime Minister's announcements, there were features, I think, both in the Times and the Guardian discussing this. And I think there was an awful lot of shrugging of shoulders. We've reached a plateau some years ago. Nationally, we are not, in that sense, out of kilter. The question, as Councillor Baxter has quite rightly raised, is how do we go forward from that? In terms of engagement, I've personally witnessed the engagement of the team that we have that goes out, and they do a fantastic job. They don't just go to schools, they actually came to an annual parish meeting in one of the villages in my ward. I didn't know they were going to come. They were there. They did an absolutely stunning job. But Councillor Baxter, both you and I, being dual-hatted district members as well as county councillors, we have a role to play in this, because the most immediate thing is the Waste Collection Authority, not the Waste Disposal Authority. And I know that if I can speak very proudly for North Kesteven, we won some prizes for some of our comms a couple of years ago. on the recycling front, and I think that's something all district councils need to redouble their efforts on, but we'll keep an eye on that. But I will now, seeing no other contributors, move us forward, because we do still have two major items left on the agenda. So with regard to item 6, I'm proposing that we record the various comments which will have been captured, made by the committee on all of the reports we've had, and I thank our officers for the reports. I move that the report be received by the committee, and I ask that our comments from the discussion of the performance indicators presented be forwarded to relevant officers and portfolio holders for their information and consideration. Does anyone dissent? In which case, please indicate. I see no dissent. In that case, that matter is agreed, and my apologies, but we really do have to move forward to item 7, which is Scrutiny Panel B, Agriculture Sector Supports in Lincolnshire Scrutiny Review, Executive Response and Action Plan. The report is on pages 37 to 56 of the agenda pack, and it follows on the scrutiny review output of the Scrutiny Panel B that was presented to the Executive on the 5th of September this year. The Executive Councillor for Economic Development and Planning has responded by letter to the Chairman of Scrutiny Panel B to thank the panel for their work and commitment, and confirm that the report was roundly welcomed at Executive, with members supporting all recommendations. This present report is the next step whereby the action plan has been developed to support and deliver the recommendations. So the actions before us as a committee this morning: the committee is invited to receive the Executive's response to the report and to agree a plan to monitor and scrutinise the implementation of the agreed recommendation. The report will be presented by Vanessa Strange, Head of Infrastructure Investment. Nicola Radford, Senior Commissioning Officer Growth, is also in attendance to support with questions around the action plan. Vanessa.
Good morning, Chairman, and thank you. As you say, in September, the Executive fully supported the recommendations made by Scrutiny Panel B, which was, of course, chaired by Councillor Taylor. The discussion was a lively and positive one, and covered a variety of elements within the report, certainly production of food, the environment from soil health to biodiversity, the value of careers in food production and agri-tech, the important role that farming plays to all of our rural communities too. Today we are bringing the action plan to committee, and this document is designed to be a live document capturing activity that is happening across our council, but also talking about our activity going forward and the new work that we will do in the coming months. I would highlight a few areas to members, but I'm sure we'll get into more during questions. In particular, the re-establishment of the Agricultural and Horticulture Forum. It was really valued, I think, by Scrutiny Panel in terms of a mechanism to work more closely with the private sector in particular, as well as those organisations that already exist in supporting food and farming nationally and across Greater Lincolnshire, from the NFU to LRSN and many in between. And really that forum will drive a lot of the activity that we talk about within the action plan. We've talked quite a lot today already about the importance of skills, and particularly delighted to use the words Operation Pumpkin. I think, again, it's just worth mentioning. But really that inspiration in young people was seen as being particularly important by the members that we work with in the scrutiny panel, and inspiring people to recognise that farming could be a career for everybody. And we went and saw some of the work that's happening, for example, up at Bishop Burton, Riseholme College, but also at the University of Lincoln, including the work that they're doing, which is really world-leading in terms of the agri-tech work there. Something we were particularly pleased to already be working on are some of the agricultural champions work, and that really is about working with people, particularly young people in the sector, to promote the work they're doing and put a sort of a real face to some of these things we're describing. So videos of people that can be used on social media talking about the careers that they already have and how they've got there is something we've been working on behalf of the panel. Work around mental health, again, has been something that the panel focused on and was discussed in some depth by the executive too. And there's some really interesting work already happening, collaborating between the university and the public health team. And finally, just something to add to the papers. Since the papers are produced for committee, we have confirmed that we will be supporting LRSN to provide a mental health worker going forward. So that's some good news to share with you as well this morning. So I'll leave that there and we'll happily take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed for a very important summary of the report. Councillors, first Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to support those words we heard from Vanessa Strange. Very encouraging to hear that last comment regarding that mental health support. We know as we carried out this work through the panel, the serious stresses and strains, particularly after the COVID pandemic that affected this industry. And also particularly encouraging to hear the support from the executive on these recommendations, which recognises all the work and effort put in by officers and members of that panel B. Very serious piece of work which we certainly focused at this important economy. Pleased to see this action plan now being put into place. It clearly demonstrates this council commitment to this important industry for this county and of course this country. And as we spoken about now, this is a live document. We need to be flexible. Earlier today at this meeting and yesterday's meeting was referred to regarding the recent floods. We spoke about the human impact on the floods. There's also the economic impact on those recent floods regarding crop production. And then 22, we saw within a few weeks, the drought followed by a flood. So we need to be very aware of those changing economic conditions and to look at how we can put in plans and policies to try and prevent this happening in the future. But I do welcome us getting to this stage and that work being recognised. Thank you all.
Looking around the room for other comments from members. I'm not seeing any. I would just endorse what Councillor Taylor has said. This is an enormously important area for our county. It's enormously important in terms of employment. It's enormously important in terms of its economic impact. I was, like Councillor Taylor, very pleased with the mental health thing. It's just very lonely being a farmer at many times. It's not the industry it was 50 years ago. And it can be a very lonely place and a very stressful place. And it is important to provide support. But I think there's something further which I would just say. I was really pleased to see the action plan. Scrutiny is very important in scrutinising and looking at what is going on, but it is only of real value if it actually generates results, if it generates improvements, and the action plan is a way of encapsulating it. And I think this committee would support entirely what the Executive Board has already said, that this is a very valuable way forward, and I'm sure it is one which will come back to this committee periodically so that we can keep up to date on how the action plan goes forward as it is implemented. So seeing no further comments from around the room, I move to the actions before us, which are to receive the report. The proposal is that we record key comments of the committee. I therefore move that the committee endorses the report and the action plan and that our satisfaction be recorded on the detailed account provided regarding the actions that seek to discharge the recommendations, and I ask that a further update on the progress of this action plan be brought back in July 2024. Any dissenters around the room? I see no dissent. In the case, that matter is agreed. We move therefore to item 8 on the agenda, which is the committee work programme. Members, you will find this item on pages 57 to 64 of the agenda pack, and this item enables the committee to comment on the contents of the work programme, which will be presented by Chiara Hatzianu, Scrutiny Officer. The actions before us are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Chiara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So, members of the committee are always invited to discuss the work programme, as it is a living document that lives and breathes and gets developed from one meeting to the next. There haven't been any changes to the work programme as it has been published, and I would just like to turn your attention to our next meeting, which is now going to be taking place on the 16th of January 2024. That is on page 58 of the report. We've got 3 items listed for the time being. First one being the revenue and capital budget proposals, which is going to be a pre-decision item for executive decision on the 6th of February 2024. We will also consider the waste transfer station improvements pre-decision report to the Executive Councillor for a decision to be made towards the end of January between the 22nd and 26th. And also we will receive a report on Town Centre Improvement Scrutiny Review, which was the output of Scrutiny Panel A. And this is going to be the executive response and action plan as we had one today for Scrutiny Panel B. And this to you, I am very happy to take any information on further items that you would like to see included in your future work programmes, or any suggestions on thematics to be considered in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Members, any comments, any questions, any additional suggestions? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if it's appropriate yet, excuse me, or not, but obviously if a certain decision is taken on Friday at Council in terms of the creation of a combined authority and mayor, obviously there will be the abolishment of the LEP at some point in time, and presumably we'll want to scrutinise what that function looks like, what successes have been, and actually how it continues to deliver for Lincolnshire.
I'm sure we will. I think the only thing that I would just put in is a caution in terms of timing, that I think the matter before us on Friday is simply going to be about referral to public consultation, so that any changes which may place are a little bit further down the track. But certainly I absolutely agree with you. It is a very, very significant change. We've talked in this committee about earlier in our meeting today about the importance of working, for example, with district tiers in economic development as well as our county council tier. There's going to be an awfully big change affecting the county if this matter does progress, and I agree with you completely. Perhaps, Chiara, we could make a note of that and put it back on the agenda in January or February to think when the timing is clearer about future actions as to what point we should look at that matter and in what way we should look at that matter. It's a good suggestion, Callum. Thank you. Any other comments from around? Justin Brown.
Chairman, can I recommend we put that paper on in February? There's a piece of work taking place at the moment about LEP transition, which will be sent to government in the middle of December, with a view that government will come back to us within about a month's time. So I think February rather than January discussion would enable us to have the breadth of conversation that Councillor Cook's requesting.
That's extremely helpful, and I think we will do exactly that. Any further comments from members? In that case, the action on this item is simply to review the work programme, as I've said. The proposal before us is that I move we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed on pages 57 to 64, with the addition which we have just discussed. Does anyone dissent? I see no dissent. In that case, that matter is agreed. So I move to the final item on the public session, to item 9 on the agenda, which is entitled Exclusion of Press and Public. Item 10 on the agenda contains exempt information, and we will now need to vote on whether we go into a private session. I therefore propose the following motion, that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by the Vice Chairman. We will now vote on this motion, and just to remind you, you are voting on whether you support the motion to exclude the press and the public from the remainder of the meeting. So all those in favour, please show. I believe that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Against? Just check, and no abstentions. So that matter is agreed. We will now have a 10-minute recess while the streaming is being switched off, and we will restart at 5 minutes past 12. And to all of those listening on the live stream, either live or later, thank you very much indeed for your attendance.